All right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. So, like yesterday, we're going to run through pretty quickly a few things about criteria for canonicity in the New Testament. And we'll actually call it quits after that, and I'm going to have you guys start to work on your study guide for your test. Your test for this class is next Wednesday, I believe. We're going to have a review. You have one quiz between now and then, so your quiz is going to be Friday. We're going to have a review day on Thursday, all day Thursday. Next Monday, we'll go over any last minute questions that you guys might have. Tuesday, we'll play a game called Kahoot, and then Wednesday will be your test. I need to double check the test calendar to make sure that's one of the testing days for theology. But if it is, that's when your test will be. So, we've gone over these four things: apostolic authorship, including Paul, who is often depicted as Judas leaves, Paul enters as one of the new 12. Universal acceptance and orthodoxy are going to be what we look at today, as well as some manuscripts. What do we mean by manuscripts? What are some Old Testament manuscripts, or some manuscripts other than scriptures that we have going on? And within universal acceptance, we're going to tie that into liturgical use. There might not be a space to write liturgical use on your outline. If not, I apologize. The main three are the upper three, but liturgical use is certainly important as well. We ended here with St. Paul. Around 51 AD, we have the first New Testament book, 1 Thessalonians, and then clearly Revelation, not only canonically, but also chronologically being the last book of the New Testament. But let's move on. So we have universal acceptance, and we'll kind of classify this under two things. We have one, that it's acknowledged by all major Christian communities in the Mediterranean. What do I mean by that? As you look down here, you'll see some of the major ones: Rome, Carthage, Constantinople, Antioch, where we are first called Christians, Alexandria, and Jerusalem. And we have this map showing the spread of Christianity in the early church. But when we look at these, all of these major communities would have accepted the 27 books which we come to know as the New Testament. There are some books, some letters written to Corinth, or some letters written to Rome, or things like that, or from Rome or outside of Antioch, from Paul on some of his journeys, that some of these communities would have read or held as important, but not all of them. When we look at the 27, especially the epistles, those 13 which we choose from Paul, they would have been used within the liturgy, particularly within many of these communities. Also, when we talk about universal acceptance, if something, when the church looks to solidify its doctrine, if something is testified to by all of the church fathers, then the church upholds it, and it would take a lot to go against those things. If one of your best friends, or your group of closest friends, say you moved away and someone new came to Pius, and they were like, oh, who is this character? Who is this person? And you and your best friends talked about you, and you could all agree about something on that person. Let's use Asia Durr, because she's just an easy example. If you talk to this year's juniors and seniors about her, who were her friends from previous years, and they all agreed about particular things, maybe she had a particular pre-game ritual, they're testifying in agreement on her behalf. So when we look at the church fathers, they often testify about the earliest books within the New Testament, particularly the epistles, and many times about the authorship of the Gospels, particularly the authorship of the Gospel of John, accrediting it to John himself. So when we have anything like that going on within the church fathers, that they're all in agreement, we see a universal acceptance that comes about because of that. And it's really hard for the church to go against, back in the day, or even current day within the modern church, to go against anything they would have said or proclaimed, partly because they were so close to the source. Continuing, we're going to talk about the church fathers really quickly, because there's a concept when we talk about universal acceptance and we say it's testified to by the church fathers. Well, who are they? We have the 12 apostles. You know of them. We include kind of in that number in a very unique way Paul as an apostle to the Gentiles. Judas ends up actually taking his life. He's replaced. However, Paul is sometimes kind of clumped in with them, depending on which biblical scholar you look at. However, in a very real way, coming directly from them, their disciples, those who followed and learned from them, we call the apostolic fathers. This includes some incredible saints like Clement of Rome and Ignatius of Antioch. Ignatius of Antioch, you've probably read things from and don't even realize it. The Didache itself would have been attributed to this group of people, to actually putting it down into writing. We have the Greek fathers coming next, several generations within the next 100, 150, 200 years. including Irenaeus, Athanasius, who we talk about solidifying the canon of the New Testament, and St. John Chrysostom, who has some incredibly profound works that the church still benefits from today. And then the Latin fathers, generally speaking the same time period, but the Greek fathers, they're just divided by the language that they speak. So you have the Greek-speaking fathers of the East and the Latin-speaking fathers of the West, this including Tertullian, who never becomes declared a saint, Cyprian, Augustine, who's a saint, and Ambrose, who's a saint as well. And in the Roman Catholic Church, John of Damascus, who lived to the 8th century, this is just kind of a piece of information for your Jeopardy knowledge one day. John of Damascus during the 8th century is generally considered to be the last of the church fathers. Moving forward, we look at orthodoxy. So we have those first two, and when we talk about orthodoxy, first we need to define it. Orthodoxy literally means the teachings and message, when we refer to it, the teachings and message must be consistent and correct. Of right. Looking at our next one, we talk about orthodoxy, and we're going to define that as the teachings and the message that must be consistent and correct to that which had already been handed on. So you're not going to include something within the New Testament that contradicts Mark as the earliest gospel. You're not going to include John or the revelation of John if it goes against something that's already been revealed, not only within the earlier New Testament pieces that have been received and kind of affirmed within liturgical use, but also within the New Testament. We don't combine anything that at its core goes against something that the church already holds true. Though there may be paradoxes that seem to go against one another, when you get down to the heart of them, they don't. So orthodoxy, that check against what is true that the church already holds to. So they had to be consistent to the faith that had already been handed on to them. And these three qualifications, alongside that of the liturgical use, really would have been what affirmed divine inspiration, and really the roots of which the church used to canonize or to put within the rule, the measuring rod of the New Testament. But going forward, were there some gospels that didn't fit this bill, that just didn't really fall under these four categories? Well, yeah, definitely. Two in particular that are kind of more infamous than the rest. You have the Gospel of Thomas. And the Gospel of Thomas contains 114 sayings, many of which suggest a secret knowledge, or gnosis meaning secret knowledge, that will gain eternal life. Just these very unique or weird at times even sayings that would suggest Jesus had kind of a different secondary life that he brought his special apostles into. Just to be quite blunt with you, it's really a load of garbage. Like, some of the things in the Gospel of Thomas, they make sense, but some of them you read and you're like, there's no way, that's not even close to orthodox. The Gospel of Judas, more recently discovered manuscripts, but it was mentioned by early church fathers as a false scripture. So something we found more recently within archaeological digs and studies. However, earliest of church fathers, that second or third generation after the apostles, already kind of threw this one out. Gnostic is an important term for you guys to know and to understand. You'll definitely see it on your test. Gnostic is just Greek for knowledge. Well, gnosis is technically Greek for knowledge. And it popped up in the 2nd century, this idea of the secret knowledge that helped to provide a way to salvation, particularly in reference to the Gospel of Judas. So we have consistent gnosis and dualism in this gospel. The Old Testament God was seen as an evil God. He keeps us trapped here in this world. That's not real within this gospel. And it's only a shadow of something that's real. So we have to break out of it. It's this very interesting and, again, kind of very unique way that some people tried to phrase the Old Testament God, pitted him against the New Testament God. So a lot of these things, when we look at gnosis and this secret knowledge, we lead to heresies, like Gnostic Docetism, particularly. But what's a heresy, first of all? Heresy is an obstinate denial after baptism. So you have to be baptized to be a heretic. Okay, it's an obstinate denial after baptism to believe a truth that must be believed with divine and Catholic faith. So let's define one of these. Well, Gnostic Docetism, hopefully if you had me last year, this sounds a little bit familiar, is a belief that held that God could not actually have taken on human flesh, and that Jesus only appeared to be human. This is a problem because if Jesus only appears to be human, he can't actually suffer, he can't actually die, he can't actually save us from sin. This heresy, which we can find traces of in the Gospel of Judas, this heresy would have directly opposed the orthodoxy of the Gospel of John, which says, "The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us." Continuing, I think we have 3 or 4 more slides. So when we look beyond this, when we look, okay, these things check off, their criteria for canonicity is good, how do we get these manuscripts? And we'll look at this in more detail tomorrow, but do we have any original writings of the New Testament today? Like, do we have any of the, John wrote this was from his hand, we know it? Short answer, no, but let's look at what we do have. Manuscripts, when we refer to that, we're talking about copies of copies of copies of copies handed down throughout generations. So what do we have? We have transmissions of manuscripts. And by the way, when we talk about manuscripts, this is a little code, we're going to use MMS. When we look at the reliability or accuracy of a manuscript, it's not its closeness to the original date-wise, but we're talking about the reliability lies in the support of already existing text. What's going on around it? So if I have 20,000 copies of one document and they all say almost identically the same thing, that points to the authenticity of that document and helps us to kind of weed out any things that may have snuck in or any errors that may have snuck in during that process. So how many manuscripts do we have? Well, 20,000. And there's no other ancient writing known to man that comes even close to this amount of manuscripts. We're going to talk about the closest one in a second. Why is this significant? Because the more manuscripts there are and the more accurate and consistent the writing is, the more it emphasizes the truth or at least the consistency to the original author that are held within. The second most ancient writing that we have tons of manuscripts of doesn't even come close. That writing would be Homer's Iliad. We have 643 manuscripts or copies of copies of copies that support Homer's Iliad. Let's compare this side by side. So Homer's 643 copies, sorry about that, were written over a span of 400 years, and we have about 95% accuracy. Well, that's pretty good. Okay, there's fairly consistent. But let's look at the New Testament. Within the first 100 years, we have 20,000 copies made of the New Testament with over 99.5% accuracy. So do we have the original John, the beloved disciple wrote it copy of the Gospel of John? No, not that I know of. However, we have 20,000 copies in the New Testament within a 100-year span, 99.5% accurate. It's hard to find anything that's that accurate even nowadays. This is a significant detail that we cannot overlook. So we're going to stop here for today. We're going to look at secondary sources tomorrow outside of the New Testament. What do we have? What's going on? But this is all you guys have for today. Moving on from here, the only other assignment you guys are going to have is to start to look at your study guide. I'm going to ask that you guys complete this one and hold on to it throughout the rest of the semester. It's going to be a bonus point on your final exam. But you have the rest of this time period to go onto your Haiku page, pull up the PDF, which is on both the welcome page and the page for today, as well as the Unit 1 page. Pull up the PDF for the study guide for the Unit 1 test, which is next Wednesday, so a week from tomorrow, and go ahead and start to work on that. I'm going to ask you guys to do it by hand and turn it in before this first test. We'll consider it maybe for some bonus points if I'm feeling in a good mood next Wednesday, which is a definite possibility, so make sure you guys do it and get it done hopefully within the next couple of days. Wednesday, we're going to go over kind of the things we've covered in the last 2 days. Thursday, we're going to play a review game for your quiz for this unit. Sorry it's so close to your test, but it'll actually work to your benefit in the long run. Monday, I know at the beginning of this I said we were going to review. If we need to review, we will, but we may have a prayer day on Monday preparing for Lent. Tuesday, we're going to play Kahoot in preparation for your test, and then Wednesday of next week will be your test for certain. So that's all I have. I'll see you guys tomorrow. I hope you had a great weekend, and I'm excited to be back in the classroom with you.